There we
All
go.
right, I can see you, Corey.
Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties.
No worries.
Okay, hello guys. So I have Fred Vallaeys on our interview here for today. And I'm quite excited about interviewing him because he knows quite a bit about Google Ads automation, something that I really need to get up to speed more on. And I know a lot of our viewers actually ask a lot about, and I just have the basics that I can cover. I got my own ideas about it, but ultimately, a lot of the stuff that I talk about on our channel could be automated. I just really haven't focused on it enough. So I'd love to hear from your perspective using PPC software, your software in specific, how you guys are doing it, how you do it intelligently, how you do it to save time. And if you guys don't know, Frederick is the owner of Optmyzr software. It's a popular Google Ads software that lots and lots of people are using. It's basically one of the top several out there. Frederick worked at Google as an early employee that worked on the Google, at that time it was called AdWords program, and had developed, was a part of developing the quality score system actually itself when it first came out. And that is what kind of inspired him to actually create the software that he did. And so from the ground up, he understood the Google Ad system. And that's why the software ultimately is so adopted, partially because he understands how the system actually works. So with that said, Frederick, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself, whatever I haven't covered, before we get into some of the automation topics and so forth?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Corey. It's good to be here. And thanks everyone who's watching and sticking around despite the technical issues. So my background, I joined Google in 2002, helped translate it into Dutch. I'm originally from Belgium, so I speak Flemish or Dutch. I live in the Silicon Valley, so I'm right here in Mountain View, California at my office today. Was just in the right area at the right time. Google was here, got to join them, got to work on building Google AdWords back in the day, now called Google Ads. And I helped to build the quality score system, which obviously some people hate because it makes you pay more, but it can also make you pay less if you have high relevance ads. I was one of the people who was on the founding team that built the AdWords editor, still a very popular tool for people who are looking to do bulk management of ads. I invented conversion tracking and search terms report. And that's kind of like a big statement, but I basically invented these for my own personal use when I was an advertiser, because folks who've been doing this a little bit not quite as long, you may not remember back in the early days of Google AdWords, there was no conversion tracking, there were no search terms reports. So if you wanted this data, if you wanted this insight, you just had to know how to build JavaScript to do these things yourself. So I built them for myself, and then the product team at Google was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like maybe other advertisers should have access to these types of insights. And then I joined the product teams working on that and giving them some guidance on what advertisers wanted. So did a lot of things. I also played some hockey with Sergey. That's my hockey jersey there from the early days at Google. Wow. So Sergey Brin, one of the founders, Larry Page came to my parties. I went to his birthday parties. So it was fun back then when Google was still small. And then it got a little too big, and I started my own company, Optmyzr. And we started solving some of the automation issues that Google just wasn't taking care of. And our mission today is to give back time to professional marketers by making their lives easier with technology.
Well, that's great. Ultimately, I've been around doing Google Ads myself since 2005. And so I've saw kind of all the changes. And, they had conversion tracking when I first started back then. But, the one thing that I've noticed over the years, slowly but surely, automation on Google's side has gotten more and more extreme. Not so much as that, the tools that they give you with smart bidding and all that to just, automate what you're doing, but ultimately them utilizing machine learning and data to power the system. So it's less and less about the human inputs, picking a certain keyword, picking a certain ad, and the system, you giving it inputs, and the machine learning figures out from the data that you give it what it actually, what's going to get the best result for their users. Because ultimately, I understand, as I mentioned on our channel all the time, that Google's just providing the best ads that they can for their users, so people want to click on ads. And they're always testing, always improving that. And tracking is a big part of that. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you about was in reference to tracking and with your software. I mean, certainly I talk about with our viewers all the time, the basics behind a primary goal and a secondary and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to hear from your perspective with your software. What do you think are the must-knows to get the most out of Google Ads when it comes to tracking, and from your perspective, how it should be done?
Yeah, and so it's kind of funny, right? Because people go to Google Marketing Live, or they watch the big dog and pony show that Google puts on every year announcing their new features. And e-commerce advertisers always come out and they're like, oh my God, this is so great. Like, we got all this new AI, we get all these new tools to help e-commerce. And then B2B advertisers in lead gen, they're always a little disappointed. And they're like, well, why didn't you do anything for us? But the fact of the matter is that offline conversion imports and enhanced conversions and all of these types of things are really the solution to getting better performance from Google Ads. However, so many advertisers haven't deployed these systems in the correct manner, or they still don't do offline conversion imports. And so when you're not connecting all the dots for the machine learning systems that drive all of this automation, then there's really not that much that Google can do. So you said it exactly right. It's like, use your primary conversion action to inform Google about what matters to your business. And if you don't have enough volume of data, but by the way, backing up on that for a second, right? So we've done some studies at Optmyzr, so you can look at our blog. But like, what is the typical number of conversions in a month that you need to see really good performance with the different automated bidding strategies? And generally, we see it's like, if you go 50 plus, 60 plus per month, performance is great. Like, there's no issues with it. Google generally says it should be about 30 a month, but we do see that if you go above that, performance is better. So what do you do if your budget is maybe a bit too small? And so these are the tips and tricks now, right? So how do you give Google some micro conversions? I'm sure everyone on the call knows this here, but a macro conversion is the thing you actually want to have happen. So that's your sale, that's your, and even in lead gen, that really is your sale, right? Nobody ultimately cares about a lead. We only care about a lead if that lead turns into a sale. So that is your macro conversion. But going into that macro conversion, there's many steps that happen before it down the funnel, or in this case, up the funnel, of course, right? When it's bigger. So, but what could those things be? Well, it's coming to my landing page. It's watching a video. It's maybe reading a PDF white paper. It's maybe looking at customer quotes. So all of these things become micro conversions. They become signals that you can still give to Google to say, oh, well, this user clicked on my ad, I paid for them, and maybe they did some good things that indicate they are probably the right type of customer. Or the right type of lead. And then as they come down the funnel and eventually convert, that's when the macro conversion triggers. That's the primary conversion action. But all of this data that you feed into Google before then is also quite helpful. And then oftentimes the challenge is, how do you value these things? Okay, so if somebody reads your page of customer quotes, that's probably an indication that they're quite interested in your service and they want to know what other people thought about it. But what's the value you put on that? That's tricky. My advice is, you don't have to put in a precise value. You just have to give Google some indicator that there is some value in that is better than zero, right? Someone looking at this page versus not looking at it, that's a good thing. So assign a little bit of value to that. And then, all things being equal, and Google saying, well, I could show your ad to this person where we predict they won't look at that customer testimonial page, or we could show it to this customer, this prospect, who we think will look at that page because they got some of the other signals that indicate a good lead. So then now, given these two possibilities, Google is going to say, well, the one who looks at the customer testimonial page gets slightly higher value. So that's the one I'm going to show the ad to. That's where I'm going to prioritize my budget. So it's little tips and tricks like that help you inform Google about what really matters to your business and drive people who are more likely to become actual customers into your pipeline.
So, okay, guys. So the number one thing that you should, I think, take away from what he just said is that it's really a struggle to get to that first 40 to 60 conversions a month. Ultimately, you need to, do whatever you need to do. It's almost like building wealth, right? When you can't compound wealth until you have a certain minimum amount of wealth, to put it like the stock market or whatever. This is very similar to that as I view it. And if you ultimately can't get the first 40 to 60 sales, you track something else that is correlated with a sale. That also, in my opinion, could just be somebody who partially filled out a form. They only filled out a couple fields. You can get creative with this. Anything that you know is better than, as he called it, zero, if you will. And then, eventually later on down the line, you can optimize for a sale per se when you built up the data. And then it'll just naturally, you just keep making more money. But I think that was very useful information. I appreciate you providing that to us. But getting into the next thing I wanted to talk about was in regards to layered automation, this so-called term, layered automation. This is something that you have, I don't know if you want to call it pioneered or coined as a phrase, and you do it's kind of like the bedrock of your software and why ultimately it's there for people to use it. Can you tell us how to automate using this so-called layered automation with your software and to get more out of Google Ads and then also save time?
Yeah. And the idea is quite simple, right? So we call it automation layering. And the idea is that Google is shifting more and more towards automating things on your behalf. But the reality is that Google is a public company, so they are trying to do the right thing for their investors, for the bottom line. So everything they do has some notion of driving revenue and profit for them. And that is not always perfectly aligned with the advertiser goal, which is also to make profit for you yourself as the advertiser. And so what we said was, why not have an automation that you as the advertiser control that is checking up on what Google is doing? And so it could be simple things like you're going to allow automated bidding from Google to happen, and you're going to have broad match keywords. But within that, Google is going to decide to show your ads for certain queries, and you may have a system that says these queries are not good. We've tried advertising on these things in the past; they haven't worked for us. So there's some knowledge that you have in your business that you could then start to automate and say, okay, this is the automation layer on top of Google's broad match. And if we see these words in the queries, we're going to automatically start negating these. And it could be something as simple as a Google ad script that looks for placements on the display network. And maybe it looks for placements that have Russian domains or Polish domains, because maybe you've identified that's not your target market. That's highly unlikely to lead to something of value for you, right? And so what that affords you the ability to do is you can now go and say, I'm still going to deploy my budget on the Google Display Network because there is something there, right? There is value on it, but not everything on it is valuable. But by me putting in place a protective layer, an automation layer that kicks out whenever a new domain shows up that meets certain criteria that I don't like and makes it a negative placement, that allows you to continue to invest in these things and pick up some of the high value traffic that does exist there. So that's a simple example of automation layering in practice. Could also be something like you're going to deploy ad scripts. But what happens if an ad script fails to run? What if your budget is being depleted? You can bring in a tool like Optmyzr, and it can be another layer of automation that monitors all of these other things that you're doing. So it can monitor your Google Ads automations, it can monitor your Google scripts, it can monitor other automations within it. And so basically, the more layers of automation that you put in place, like all of them are checking each other, and it becomes less and less likely that you're going to hit some sort of an issue. And these issues, by the way, are real. So even just in the last couple of weeks, the Google Ads API was having downtime, and the front end of the Google Ads system was experiencing issues and delays. And so the more that you can have someone like Optmyzr. So we were monitoring this very closely. When we see this happening, we have manual systems that kick in that can help prevent budget overages. So it's protecting you from those system failures that don't happen often, but they do happen and they can be very costly.
Yeah. So guys, and the important thing to recognize here is, to be a good Google Ads manager or steward of your account, you have to come up with some sort of rules, or should anyway, to actually get the most out of your account. There's always something that, you may say, well, everything's changing all the time. How could you come up with rules? But there's simple rules like there's a certain type of keyword that you don't want. And if anything with the word free in it, we want to get rid of it. Or if a keyword has 200 clicks and hasn't had any conversions, we want to get rid of that keyword. This is the stuff that's easy and prime for scripting to take care of. Ultimately, and then as Frederick said, you can use scripting to kind of make sure your scripting works, because that's kind of the downside of scripting is, if you put all your faith in that, then if that fails, then you got a problem. But that's not what he is advocating. The other thing I would just say real quickly in regards to, script automation is you could use that to make sure your tracking is working. And when server-side tracking, you can ultimately maybe come up with scripting that will help you monitor that. So instead of all the time thinking, am I checking this? I'm doing that. Maybe instead spend your time in creating these rules in which you have the scripts in place to make sure that those things are being done. And then you have scripts to check those scripts. You can basically get everything kind of distilled down into a dashboard that just monitors what you need to monitor if you put that time in to build it out. So yeah, exactly. It just takes time to build out, but it can be absolutely worth it at the end, especially if you're trying to do that and manage your business at the same time.
Exactly. Have those dashboards so you have that high level view, but then also think about what is your secret sauce as an agency, right? Like what is it that you bring to your customer that differentiates you? And oftentimes these are processes that are very clearly defined, and it's not necessarily something anyone else is doing, right? But it's a process that you have that makes you a really good account manager. And then start to think about how much time do you spend doing this process. And if it's well defined, then is this a process that you could turn into an automation? And what is the value of automating that? And then also think about some things that you check on a weekly or a monthly basis. Would it actually be better for your account if this was done daily, so more frequently? And maybe the reason you don't do it daily is because it's just too many hours of manual labor and your client doesn't pay you enough for this, so you don't do it. But if you did, it would add more value. And in automation, I mean, the difference between doing it once a week and once a day is basically one settings field where you change the frequency of how often it runs. So that's how to think about it. And then the other thing is, when you think about workflows and processes, we often struggle to automate something that needs some level of human judgment. And this is where we get into deterministic and flexible programming. So think about it like this, right? If you have a process of looking at search terms and you say anytime a search term spends 3 times the typical cost per conversion, but drives no conversions, we want to make it a negative keyword. Okay, and that's great because these are numbers. So every day you pull the report, you look at how much it spent, you compare that to the average spend. So it's all numbers. It's deterministic. There's no judgment on this. It's just if this, then that. But what if you wanted to do something a little more flexible and you said, well, I would typically make it a negative, but if it was actually like super relevant to my business, then I maybe want to give it 5 times the budget or 5 times the typical cost before a conversion. That's something where you need a human, because the machine has a really hard time understanding of like, how relevant is this? But this is where AI comes in and all of this new AI stuff. Large language models are very good at making sort of these human level decisions about semantic analysis and how closely related is this query to my foundational keyword. And so now even within Optmyzr, we have what we call the rule engine, where you can combine deterministic rules, but you can also do things that pull in a large language model. So you can say, how similar is this query to my keyword, and make that a factor in the decision process. Wow. So it's almost like having human in the loop type of automation, but still making it highly automatic so that you don't have to step in frequently to look at stuff because the machine itself is not quite sure because of its deterministic rules.
Okay, that's great. So ultimately, I think the main reason why people don't use automation more is because, this is a business owner that doesn't know anything about automation to begin with. And even though it sounds great at the surface level, to get over the learning curve of doing it, it's hard. And, there's now vibe coding where you don't have to know how to code to be able to code using ChatGPT. And a lot of people are doing that as well, which, frankly, I know a lot of that's risky in my opinion, because if you don't know how to code and then you don't know much about Google Ads and then you're putting the two together, maybe you have some issues. What do you think is, obviously the Optmyzr software makes it easy to do scripting and automation of your account. But for the average Joe, what do you think is, comparing like vibe coding to your software or some other options to people doing automation, what are like the pros and cons of these different things? And what would you basically tell the user on an overall basis that wants to get into this?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly recommend that anyone who doesn't want to get their hands too dirty with the actual coding and maintaining the connections to the Google Ads APIs and taking a look at how the API changes. Several times a year, Google makes changes to how it works, to what they name things. So there's just a lot of like backend infrastructure maintenance that goes into this. So we have a team of 100 people at Optmyzr. And obviously that's a big investment. We invest millions of dollars a year into maintaining these systems. So if that's not what you want to do, but you'd rather have a much lower cost subscription and have it done for you, then Optmyzr would be a great tool, a great solution. But there's also this whole notion that, like you said, right, vibe coding is kind of a new and upcoming thing. And it's the idea that you no longer need to know how to write code to be able to automate something or to be able to build something. So the people who are going to be the most successful, quote unquote, developers of the future are not the best people at writing down the code, but they are the best at understanding what the automation, what the tool needs to do. So in a way, they are the best product managers who know how to describe what it is that needs to be done. And now guess what? That's probably you listening to us on the podcast today. You have a deep understanding of what is the business trying to achieve? What are the constraints that this business has? How do they like to go about things? Knowing all of this, what would be the ideal solution? And the beauty is you can do vibe coding, you can describe all of this, and the system, the vibe coding mechanism will build the automation for you. Now, there are still some caveats in that, right? Getting vibe coding to connect into the Google Ads API, I haven't really seen systems do that very well. If this is what you're trying to do, it gets into the danger territory that you're describing, which is you do need a developer environment where you're connecting into the API, you're maintaining separate pieces of code, and you need to like connect all of this together. And that's still difficult. But if it was something a little bit simpler, like, hey, here's like 5 reports that I've downloaded from Google Ads, usually I would put those into Excel and I would do a bunch of VLOOKUPs and I'd run a bunch of macros. And then at the end of like a 6-hour process, I'd come out with like these insights. Okay, that is exactly the type of thing that you could vibe code, program it. And now you'll have a little tool that says, okay, just upload these 5 files, these 5 metrics files that you have from Google Ads. And 30 seconds later, it spits out your insight. And now it becomes repeatable. It becomes scalable. Now you can do it for 30 clients instead of just 5 clients in a month. And that's going to be really what then allows you to scale your business.
Okay, sure. So, and then another thing I wanted to also mention to you, if you don't have much experience with doing automation, if you start to get into doing this, the main issue that comes up is not that maybe you can absolutely create a script today that will automate some particular task in Google Ads, but the API itself is updating a lot. So that means that you also have to update your script, your process that you have had to put that script together, or whatever you're using as an interface. And that in itself is very time consuming. It can also just take away from the whole idea or the time saving of actually automating anything in the first place. So if you use a bigger software like Optmyzr to do the interface between Google Google Ads API and and to provide the interface to it, then with them understanding that they have all these developers basically that are keeping an eye on the Google Ads API and the updates with it, so that your automation essentially, once you set it up, won't break once it's set up. Which, of course, if you're automating mission critical things, you can't just have it break. You can't just be busy with a customer and then your stuff breaks and you find out about it 2 days later. So for that matter, I would want to, if I were going to get into doing a lot of the more advanced stuff, certainly look into using the Optmyzr software to ultimately handle the scripting that you want to do, so that it doesn't ultimately just break down on you eventually. Because eventually Google Ads' API is going to change. It's not a matter of if, but when. And you could probably tell me, Frederick, how often they update it. I'm sure it's quite often. And scripts have to be updated quite often.
Yeah, it's like 3 times a year right now, I think, that they update it. So there's a very clear calendar on when the updates happen and then how soon thereafter they deprecate the old functionality. But it does mean there's a continuous cycle of having to update things to stay compatible. And not only is it sort of the backwards compatibility as they change what things are named and how they function, but it's also all of these new things being added. So think about Performance Max campaigns, and they now have new insights, new levels of data, search terms data. They have new exclusion capabilities. And as that's getting added to the Google Ads system capabilities, it also comes into the API. And so then you have to make a choice. Is that worth investing in? Because that's going to make me stay up to date with the latest ways of being able to manage accounts. And that in and of itself, again, just becomes a major project to keep innovating alongside Google. And that's why it's probably worthwhile to have a team like Optmyzr on your side because we do that for you. And then the other consideration is size of accounts. So I'm a huge fan of scripts. Obviously, I started writing them 15 years ago. I shared quite a few scripts on Search Engine Land, other places. But my frustration was, like, you get to an account with 1 million keywords. Well, guess what? It's probably not going to be able to get through all of the data in the 30-minute limitation that the script has. It also has limitations on how many entities it can touch. So now I had to start figuring out ways to take one account and split it into pieces. I was like, okay, first I'm going to do all of the campaigns that start with the letter A, and then all the campaigns that start with the letter B. And so then I'd be splitting it out. And luckily there's 24 hours in the day and 26 letters in the alphabet. So that was pretty close, right? I could, in the course of a day, I could roughly get through a whole account. But that meant that instead of having hourly automation, I only had it daily. It meant that I was doing really hacky things to make it all play together. And then at the next level, I was like, okay, well, now I don't just have this one script that I need on my account, but I have 10 different scripts. I have one for budgets, I have one for bids, I have one for keywords, I have one for placements, and the list goes on and on and on. And so at the end of the day, I was like, oh my God, I'm maintaining so many different scripts in so many different accounts, and like one thing breaks in one account and you don't find out about it on time, and now shit hits the fan, you lose that client. So just maintaining scripts became my full-time job. And that's when I realized we just need to build something on the API, something that's more scalable, that's more that has more trackability, so we know when it's down. And that's when Optmyzr came along.
I want to say certainly if for you guys running agencies, you certainly need to have something that's going to be reliable and fault tolerant to build all your, building and automating your clients' automation of their account, or should I say the optimization of their accounts. You need something reliable. And, Optmyzr has been around over a decade. They've kind of worked out all the kinks. I don't believe in software, as I mentioned many times on my channel before, that's been around just a few years, because they really haven't worked all the kinks out of it. It's like a new car model. When it comes out, they don't know what they don't know yet. So Frederick's really worked through these issues, and you ultimately are going to get something. Once it's all set up, you put all the work and the time into to get it working, it's not going to just disappear on you a couple of years later because, hey, the company's out of business now, and you got to do it all over again. So I will say that, kind of as an added bonus to the Optmyzr software itself. And so anyway, well, thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask actually ask you a couple other things here, Frederick, about one, I know a lot of people, when it comes to scripting, people talk about that in regards to PMAX campaigns. And the one thing that really irritates people the most about PMAX is they're hiding information, which in my, opinion, it's been that, that's partially a feature of it essentially. But we've always wanted like a channel breakdown with PMAX. So you could say, hey, this is where my money is going, instead of this being this black box, and you could separate it out. And so with Optmyzr, what kind of insights can you get? Can you actually get and drill down, like ROI by channel, so that you would actually know, hey, I want to exclude all these placements, so on and so forth, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So it was Mike Rhodes, I think, who first wrote the script that gave you the channel breakdown for PMAX. So Optmyzr then also built that capability into our software. So if you sign up for Optmyzr, you'll immediately have a channel breakdown with all the metrics that allows you to make decisions. So that's just one of the insights from PMAX, right? We always do our best to stay as current as possible with all of the newest capabilities. And now Google has the channel insights themselves, and they have these beautiful visualizations that they show. But the question still then becomes, what do you do with that data? So if you see that you get lower return on investment from YouTube than search, do you exclude YouTube? Well, not really, probably, because yes, of course, search being lower funnel is going to have higher conversions and a better return on ad spend than YouTube, which tends to be upper funnel and more about demand generation. So you just have to understand what is the function that each of these channels plays, and then what's the interaction between them. And so it becomes a much more complex equation about deciding how to act on the insights that you get. And I think that's partially the reason that Google has been so hesitant to show these types of channel breakdowns, because people are just going to make bad decisions based off of that. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it really hard and you think you've got the right decision, then certainly go and do placement exclusions, add negative keywords. And some of these things, then of course, when the Google Ads interface doesn't allow you to do them, then by extension, that also means Optmyzr cannot do them, because the functionality just does not exist within Google Ads. But then talk to your account rep and let them know, okay, well, here's something where I can show you I'm wasting money, and this is why, and this is, if you don't fix this, then I'm going to pull my whole budget from PMAX. That's the type of insight that Google needs, because that's going to get their product management teams to make those changes that you need. But in all fairness, and I do want to, I've worked at Google, right? So the product managers really oftentimes are on your side as the advertiser, but there are certain things that they try to do. They spend long hours building functionality, and then after many, many reviews, there's one lawyer who says, sorry, can't do it. And it's literally months of work on your behalf that's down the drain. So always give Google the benefit of the doubt. They have people there who are trying to do the right thing for you, but there are circumstances in big companies that sometimes make it hard for them to deliver on that, right? But the more you can tell them what it is you need, they truly do listen to that. They truly want to do the right thing for you.
Sure. No, that's a gem. And ultimately, the more you spend on Google Ads, the more successful you're at with it. The more, I would say, support you're going to get from your reps, and the reps are going to have more. They're going to be able to have more pull for you, from what I've noticed. So when you do actually get somebody good, you really want to stick with them and work with them, so that when this stuff comes up, you actually have an outlet. And then, just stuff like, an ad disapproval, all that stuff that the rep can actually help you in that situation and all that. So appreciate that insight. Anyway, Frederick, also, I know you were a part of the quality score team initially when you worked at Google. I know Optmyzr has a historical quality score rater, or, basically instead of in Google Ads, guys, if you don't already know, you actually can see your quality score, but you can't see what it was before. So if you haven't been writing down meticulously in a spreadsheet what your quality score was in January and February and March and so forth, you really just don't know if your account is headed in the right direction. Are you actually doing the right things to get your quality score to go up? Is it headed in the right direction, or is there a light at the end of the tunnel because you don't have any of the historical data? Which, if you are doing the right things, or should I say, if you've done the right things, and Google systems getting more and more data on what you have as an ad, as a landing page, as a website, the quality score should be getting better. But if you don't have the historical data, ultimately you don't know if you need to make any improvements because you don't know what you don't know. So the Optmyzr software automatically downloads, if you will, and it has it charted out essentially, where you can see the quality scores for each keyword and then historically. And can you just speak on that feature a little bit? Because I think that is a major part of the software that people should use and get value out of, given that tells you more than really anything, whether you need to be doing more with your ads or not, or you already are on the right track.
Yeah, the quality score tracker, certainly it's an oldie, but it's still very valuable because, as you all know, the ad rank depends on how much you're bidding, which is mostly decided now by automated bidding, as well as, on the other hand, the quality score. So the higher your quality score, the lower you have to pay to maintain the same ad rank. And that's a simplification, but that's fundamentally what it boils down to, right? So quality score is really important to help you hit your ROAS targets. Now, when I worked at Google on the quality score team, I knew there was such huge demand for what you're explaining, Corey, which is like a daily insight is my quality score headed in the right direction? Are the optimizations that I'm doing paying off in terms of getting me those lower costs for advertising? There was huge resistance from Google to disclose this. And so I knew that when I left Google, this was the first tool that I could build and people would just love it. I didn't know how I was going to make money with it, but I knew somebody would pay attention. And I'd have at least an audience to give this to. And then a couple of, I can't remember if it was months or years after we'd started Optmyzr and we had the quality score tracking tool, Google did finally introduce historical quality score. But here was the crazy thing. What they did is they would show you the quality score on the first day of the date range you selected and the last day. But all of the days in between, you couldn't see. So if you really wanted to know what was your daily progression, you'd literally have to pull a report from for each single day, look at the quality score, and then you could build your chart that showed you what that trend or pattern was. And so that's just an example, I think, of Google has all this data. All this data exists in the Google systems, but the way they visualize it sometimes is not the most beneficial or the most useful to advertisers. And that's where you either build a script that automates this for you, or you look at a tool like Optmyzr that has already done the hard work. And so now you can come in. And what's cool is we show you an account level quality score. So just for your whole account, we tell you, is it trending up or down? And then if it's trending down, we will identify which campaigns are most responsible for that downward trend. We'll highlight those in red. You can click on those campaigns and you can start to understand within these campaigns, are there specific ad groups that are problematic? And then we break it down. So we take you down that journey and then we say, okay, here's the keyword that really has a low quality score and that's impacting your overall quality score. And so that's a net negative to your account. And then we even offer suggestions so that we can help you say, okay, this maybe it's a highly relevant keyword to your business, but the reason the quality score is bad is you don't have a good ad text that convinces people that it's actually relevant to what you do. So then we have a one-click system that says, take this keyword, break it out into a new ad group by itself, and then we'll help you put up an ad text that better reflects that high relevance of that keyword so that your next quality score update is going to be much better and you're going to start to see some of the financial benefits of that as well.
Yeah, one of the most common questions I get is just, hey, Corey, my quality score on this particular keyword is not good. What can I do to fix this? And people are often lost. So that's great that you have not only just here's what's the problem in terms of your quality score and what's bringing down your average, but what to do to fix it. And I do want to also say it's very, very, a lot of people don't understand it. It's kind of like almost like a conspiracy theory that, Google Ads has an account level score that they assign to your account. And yes, they don't say that they have this, but ultimately if you do a poor job as an advertiser, Google can assume in the future any future ads that you run are also likely not to be good. I mean, this is just, why would not Google do this? So I see your overall quality score average really as a kind of a metric that you want to aspire to grow, given that, ultimately your account as a whole is going to do better when you have everything that you're doing in the account is quality. You're not just leaving also, in other words, a bunch of keywords that aren't doing very good, and you're just saying, I don't care about that. Doing regular pruning of what you got and just getting rid of the waste, and then, replacing it with new stuff, and then trying to get that to work, and then shedding the waste again, almost like a snake sheds its skin, if you will, and just doing this over and over again. And Google is going to view you as an advertiser as one of their favorites, and they're going to try to show your ad more. They're going to give you a bigger ad. They're going to give you a higher ad rank. You're not going to pay as much per click. All this stuff happens once you actually show that you're doing better than your competition. And this overall account level quality score that averages all your quality scores really tells you, I would say more than anything, that one metric to look at that tells you whether or not all this is going to happen or not. So it's a great feature. I wish Google Ads had it just in the native interface. So appreciate explaining that.
I'm very happy they don't, because it's yet another thing that Optmyzr does better, right? But yeah, Corey, I mean, I can tell how long you've been in the industry, and by the way you explained this, and it's really great to see digging a little deeper. And I would challenge everyone who's listening to sort of take that deeper perspective, right? Because like Corey's saying, when you ask Google, is there an account level quality score? And they tell you, no, there is not. They're not lying. There is no like one thing that's in the system as like account quality score. But there is this whole thing that you just explained, which is this is prior knowledge that Google can use when it's estimating future quality scores. It is something that feeds into the machine learning AI system. And so, yes, it is a thing that matters, even though technically they are correct when they say it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist as a single metric you can look at, but it exists as a concept that informs a lot of other things that happen in the system. So like always try to go a little bit deeper and try to understand technically what is probably happening when machine learning is at work, because taking a deeper perspective, I think, is going to put you in the right direction for getting more success.
Yeah, it's really just simple. I mean, if you're going to do a business partnership with somebody and you just think about it as what can I get out of it, and you want to, get as much of that, make the deal as one-sided as possible, that's a deal that's likely not to work out well. The deal works when both people are equally benefiting, more so long-term. You want to think about it, Google's perspective, what they want. Ultimately, what they want is what you want at the end of the day. They want, good advertisers that help their users. So think about, and then, obviously what the user wants is what Google wants. And so if you just think about it from that perspective, and you always are striving to provide a better experience for their users, you're going to ultimately do better, because that's what Google wants you to do. So anyway, so Frederick, with all that said, the Optmyzr PPC software, we went through a bunch of stuff, that why you can use it, how you can use it. If you wanted to give a summary to our audience as to why they should try the software, give it a shot. Because just to let you know, I would say half of our audience is agency owners, and half of them are, non-agencies just running Google ads and Facebook ads and some other ads also. But a lot of the people watching are mainly doing Google ads. I would say 70-80% are doing just Google ads. What would you say to them why they should try the software?
Well, it's no risk. It's 2 weeks free. You get full functionality. So that's maybe one of the main reasons. But in terms of what it's going to enable you to do, think of it as a PPC toolkit. So all of the things that you tend to frequently spend a lot of time on, we're going to help you automate it, and we're going to help you get insights from it. So key things like reporting, budget management, making sure you're not spending more than the client asked you to spend, and maybe doing this on some sort of weird cycle. I mean, right now, Amazon Prime Day is happening, so some advertisers may have budgets that are a little bit off cycle, because this is happening from July 8th until July 11th, right? So we give you budget capabilities that are going to save you a lot of time. Reporting budgets, optimizations, and then optimizations, we have them at 3 levels. We have really simple, quick wins. These are Optmyzr Express, 5 things you can change right now: approve, reject, done. Or we can do full account optimizations, which is we have a certain methodology of how we evaluate good or bad keywords, queries. let's run this through 1 million queries in our whole account, but let's do that in a matter of 10 minutes. We can do that with a full optimization. And then we have the rule engine capability, which is basically saying, I want to construct this myself based on my own secret sauce. So it's almost like a script generator. You just put together the boxes of if this, then that, if not, then that. And you build all of this logic, and then we can automate it for you. And then you take all of this stuff, we put this into blueprints. So as an agency, you can say, if I have a mid-sized client, these are the 15 things that I want to do on a weekly basis, and these are the 5 things I want to do on a monthly basis. You stick this into a blueprint, and then we give you basically a wizard that says, okay, start the blueprint for this client, and we take you step by step through each of the things you need to do. And it gives you consistency. So now you as the agency owner, maybe you give this to your staff to do. You can check up and you can see how many things were done, whether they were done on the schedule. And then if Google next month comes out with a new capability, you can just go to your blueprint template and say, add this one new task to all of my accounts. And now you know that the next month, all 50 accounts that you manage are going to get this thing done for them because it's part of the blueprint. And then that you wrap all of this into a nice layer of AI. So we now have like cutting edge AI functionality that suggests things like ad text, but it also helps interpret reports. It helps explain what's happening in the account to your clients. So it gives them the happy news. Like these are 3 things that agency did really, really well. You should be happy. But then on the flip side, we also tell you, here's the 3 things you really should work on the next month so that your client stays happy. So AI is being baked into all of the workflows, all of the tools to make it much easier to use. And then we have a kick-ass suite of e-commerce and shopping ads capabilities as well. So anything from keeping your inventory aligned to your campaigns, updating the pricing, all of that, it's all in Optmyzr. So would love for you to take a look and give it a shot.
Great. I had one just final follow-up question. As you were mentioning all these great features of the software, one of the most common, challenges as somebody who runs an agency, and I think just business owners in general, with the lack of understanding of the seasonality of how changes in Google Ads, the performance, your CPA, your ROAS that you're getting throughout the year, and volume changes. Does your software take into consideration those changes? Will it give you insight saying like, okay, you can expect now that we've hit May and we've hit the summer or whatever, that the performance is going to be different. Therefore, you should make these kind of changes. Does it make any seasonal inferences to you, or have you thought about making that a part of the software?
Yeah, so you can do it a couple of ways. So we have the spend projection tool, and that takes into account seasonality, and basically it'll forecast for the remainder of the year or whatever period you want, and then show you, maybe heading into summer right now, you're going to have a little bit of a lull, but then you'll see a pickup again around BFCM. So that's kind of a very typical seasonality, but if yours is a little bit weirder, our software will show to you what that would be. And it also shows you the budget capability. So you can go to your client now and say, hey, did you know that 2 months from now, based on seasonality, but also based on sort of the overall growth in the industry, this is how much budget you should have to fully capture the opportunity. And so you can get ahead of that. That's one of them. And then the other thing is we have what we call the PPC Investigator, one of our favorite tools. So this will pinpoint why a change is happening in your account. So say that you didn't look at the seasonality ahead of time, and right now you're like, why are my conversions so low in July? Well, we will show you, is this driven by a decrease in search volume, which at the end of the day, if the search volume is just not there because people seasonally are not looking for it, then that explains a lot. But it could be that the volume is actually there, and maybe there's a competitor who came in, and so your rank has dropped, and so your overall volume is down. So that could be one of the reasons. And then we take that one step further. Once we've identified one of the core reasons why your metrics are not where you want them to be, we also pinpoint the parts of your account most responsible. So it could be that your account is doing just fine overall, but there's this one campaign that's just for some reason seen a huge drop. We can pinpoint that, and then we can say, okay, well, this campaign seems to have dropped because you made some budget changes, or maybe you added negative keywords. And so that can help you quickly troubleshoot some of the main concerns that a lot of advertisers see in their accounts.
Incredible. Well, I'll tell you guys, I mean, really to do a good job for our clients, what we have to do certainly is we go ahead and we plot out a whole year in advance our budget, January, February, March, because almost all businesses are seasonal. And the capability of getting a conversion at a certain rate or cost changes based upon what time of the year you're in, because there's just more demand, less demand. There's less people searching, more people searching, but also the intent changes. During Christmas time, they're easier to part with their money for e-commerce, or for home services. People are more apt to do home renovations in the springtime. That's just the mood that they're in. And this confuses a lot of people. And it's easy to go in and say, when the down season is there, oh, something's wrong, I'm going to change my ads. And then ultimately you screw up your account because that was normal for that time of the year, and you make a mistake, and then you screw up your account even more. But the Optmyzr software does a lot of this for you. So instead, it gives you like a sanity check, if you will, whether you should change stuff or not. Because the default best is don't change anything if nothing's broken, because you're going to see volatility in your ad account making changes when you don't need to make a change, or just making changes to see if that will fix something. The best, value I see that your software is going to provide is, here's what you should change, here's what you shouldn't change. So you're just not randomly changing stuff. And that's what a good consultant will provide too. But the software is doing a lot of what the consultant would do at the end of the day. We never should just be randomly testing stuff and say, oh, I can do this all myself. I don't know. I've only managed one account for a little bit. I can handle this all myself. The extra information is going to really be useful. It's going to save you so much time and money from testing stuff that doesn't work, and then you got to change it back, and then that's going to cause volatility in your account. So anyway, I appreciate Frederick, you explaining all this, and I was really happy that you came on today. I learned a lot, and it doesn't look like we have any questions, so I think we'll just be able to wrap it up with that.
Okay, well, thanks for having me on and giving me a platform here, and great stuff. I might also have to hire you as a salesperson for Optmyzr. I can't believe how much you love it. So thank you very much. And anyone who's got questions about it, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to engage there and take the discussion further.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot again, Frederick. I'll talk to you later.
Bye, Corey.
Bye.